Hey gang, how's it going? How you doing? I wanted to talk very quickly about obedience and why God wants us to be obedient and what that is meant to mean for our lives as Christians. And so we need to first of all understand that for many believers, many Christians, they have a wrong understanding of obedience. So immediately people hear obedience, it begins to trigger like a sort of internal tension between them. It sounds heavy, it sounds like as if there's, pressure. God is about to pressure them. It feels like being dutiful without being delightful. Some even sounds like punishment. And at its core, what happens is that it now reduces obedience to behavior management. It makes the Christian life feel very transactional. But we have to understand that biblical obedience is a lot deeper than that. It's not about rule keeping. It is primarily about being aligned with God in terms of relationship. It's the movement of our hearts that trust God in relation to the one God who's speaking back to us. And so it's not merely doing what you are told. What's the best way to frame this? It's responding to the God who knows what you are, who you are, how you're made, and what your life is meant to become. Which means that obedience cannot be approached as external pressure. It should be understood as an internal agreement with truth. And so when God is asking us to be obedient, we have to understand something, that God is not insecure about his love. And we need to settle this. God does not seek obedience from us because he's needy. He's not insecure. He's not threatened by your autonomy or your freedom. He's not trying to gather obedience because, he's some sort of dictator. And the reality is that whether you obey him or not, he still remains God. Your resistance to God does not diminish him. It does not change him. Your surrender to God doesn't even complete him. So if his instruction, if his call to obedience is not for his ego, then what is it for? It's for your life. It's for your preservation. It's for your transformation and formation. It is for your participation in a truth that predates you. God's commandments to you do not emerge from any sort of deficiency from him. They emerge because he loves you. He speaks because he sees you. He directs because he knows you. He leads because he's not indifferent to what your life becomes. And so obedience to God is not him demanding something that benefits you, that benefits him. It is God inviting you into something that is designed to heal, to order, to restore, to sustain. And so we now have to take into context the fullness of the Bible, and we have to come to a conclusion that obedience is primarily the love language of God.
Things you want.
Obedience is saying, oh, God, I trust your sight more than my instincts. I trust your wisdom more than my immediate interpretation. I trust that your direction is not designed to shrink me, to cage me, but to shape me. And this is why obedience has to be personal, because it's not just merely a moral act or moral obligation. It is a response to the relationship you have. And so if you think God is harsh or angry, or for lack of a better word, an angry African dad, obedience will feel like a threat. If you feel God is withholding whatever you think he's withholding from you, obedience begins to feel suspicious. But if you know him as Father, if you know him as shepherd, if you know him as designer, if you know him as your source, then obedience begins to feel different. You'll probably think, oh, this obedience will stretch me, it will cost me, but it will not feel like as if God is trying to dominate you. And so we have to understand that if obedience is God's love language, and we are made in his image and in his likeness, it means that by extension, obedience is also our own love language. We were not made as independent beings designed to flourish apart from him. And so what that tells us that obedience is not foreign to us. It is meant to be part and parcel of our lives. It is actually consistent with the design that God had from the very beginning. And so we were created, we were built to flourish in a union life with him. And so when we obey God, we are not becoming less of ourselves. We are becoming more like who God has called us to be. And so obedience is not a suppression of your identity. God isn't afraid of your personality. What He's asking you to do is that come into obedience so that you can know who you truly are. And this is why disobedience actually does more damage than people think, because we think of it as rule breaking. But rather, disobedience is actually bending or turning yourself away from who you truly are. Hope that makes sense. And so, when we start to move in disobedience, and this is why many Christians are frustrated. They're frustrated because they can't hear God, they cannot move in obedience. Because they can't be moving in obedience, they can't come into alignment. And so basically, they live their lives in disobedience. It doesn't matter whether you can hear or not. The fact is that you're not living in sync, so you're in disobedience. And so what happens that for the believer, and even for people who don't believe in God, the consequences are internal confusion, instability, loss of clarity, inner contradiction. And this isn't because God is petty or He's punishing your mistakes, but because you've removed yourself from the proper order. A fish out of waters is not suffering because the water is offended. It's suffering because it is not in the environment that it was created for. And so when we become frustrated, people will assume, or when your life is mismanaged or you're frustrated with your life as a Christian, you think, oh, God is far away from me, prayer is not working, oh, my faith feels dry. But the issue is not distance on God's side. It is the distance from Him on our side. And so we have to understand something. God is calling us to obedience because it's for your good. Because obedience at its core is designed to repair the errors of the past, to prepare the future, and to align the present. That is the design of obedience. And so obedience draws you into sonship, because those who are led by the Spirit of God, it is they who are the sons of God. And so to resist God, to disobey God, to live a life of disobedience isn't just to resist God or deny God, but it's actually denying yourself. And so I'll conclude with this. Obedience is not God trying to get something from you. It is God trying to bring you into agreement with who He knows you are. Thank you for listening. And if this message made sense to you, please do share.